Sir William Gerald Golding was born on September 19, 1911 in Newquay, Cornwall. He studied at Oxford and in 1934 published his first collection of poems, entitled Poems. In 1935 he got his bachelor's degree and moved to a religious community. He worked as an English teacher in a primary school. In 1938 he married Anne Brookfield, and 2 years later their first child, David, was born. He spent the first years of the war in the Navy, where at the command of a ship he carried out important war maneuvers, even during the Normandy landings. In 1945 his second daughter, Judith Diana, was born. Later he left the Navy and returned to teach at Salisbury. In 1954 he published the novel Lord of the Flies. Later he published several novels, received an honorary degree from the Sorbonne, and in 1983 was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. He died on June 19, 1993, of a heart attack. A plane crashes on a deserted island, and the only survivors are a group of boys from an English school who, in the absence of an adult guide, must manage to govern themselves and survive on the island. Initially, under the guidance of Ralph, the most reasonable of the older boys, things seem to go well. The boys divide up the tasks. Jack, leading the choir boys, is in charge of the hunting expeditions, while the others, Ralph, Piggy, Roger, Simon, and the twins Sam and Eric, take turns in the shelters, picking the fruit, looking after the little ones, and keeping the fire on top of the island alive, which is essential to be sighted by passing boats. During the day, life on the island seems to be going in the right direction, but it is the darkness that fuels their deepest fears. In fact, the presence of a supposed beast terrifies them. As time goes by, the boys begin to fail the primary tasks necessary for survival, and reason begins to abandon them. Jack, who has a grudge against Ralph and a certain envy for the role he plays, with the support of Roger and the choir boys, establishes a real tribe, characterized by facial paintings and tribal rituals, including the veneration of a rotting pig's head called the Lord of the Flies. It is precisely in the delirium of one of these tribal dances that the poor Simon, mistaken for the beast, is brutally murdered. Ralph, Piggy, and the twins then decide to move away from the group, which, following the theft of Piggy's glasses, indispensable for lighting the fire, settles down at the top of a rocky hill. The four of them decide to go and retrieve their glasses, and try to establish a sort of dialogue in an attempt to reason with Jack and the others. However, this expedition proves fatal for Piggy, who is killed by a boulder thrown from above, while the twins are tortured and forced to join the tribe. Ralph, therefore, remains alone and escapes into the forest, chased by the others. In an attempt to flush him out, the tribe sets fire to the forest, and Ralph, now resigned to death, escapes to the beach, where he runs into a naval officer, whose ship had been lured by the fire. The officer is surprised and moved by the tears of the boys, veterans of a terrible experience. The 1963 film, directed by Peter Brook, remains quite faithful to the book. It presents some subtle differences, but not major upheavals. Except for some peculiarities, such as the fact that in the film it's a plane passing near the island without spotting them, instead of a boat, as in the novel, the most substantial difference is the time of the narrative. In fact, in the novel, the time the boys stay on the island appears much longer than in the film. This is also evident from their physical appearance, that, if in the course of the novel changes significantly, in the movie it's less clear. The main theme of the work is the author's conception of man, that he considers bad by nature. Therefore, Golding decides to deal with the subject not by talking about adult men, therefore possibly influenced by life experiences that have led them to be bad, but about children, the part of society considered pure and still unaware of the evils of the world. So, to prove his theory that malice in humans is innate, he takes the characters of his novel to the most primitive and wild state, thus revealing the deepest aspects of the human soul. Moreover, another theme less evident than the first one, which is however treated by the author, is that of the influence of the masses by totalitarian regimes. In fact, on the island we find two opposing leaders, Ralph and Jack. The two are based on what can be defined as the main fears that grip the boys on the island. The fear of not being saved, and the fear of being attacked in the sleep by an alleged beast. Being on an island that offers a certain kind of well-being to the children and that guarantees their survival, the fear of not being rescued takes second place, making the fear of being attacked by an unknown presence prevail. Since it is difficult to remedy this type of fear, it is precisely on this fear that Jack leverages, promising others to kill the beast and protect them, thus receiving the support of everybody. Therefore, he can be compared to a leader of any totalitarian regime. I decided to talk about this novel because, having read it recently, I found it very interesting. I am a fan of literary classics, and with the intention of reading it for some time, it caught my eye in a bookshop in Edinburgh. So I bought it in the original language and it didn't disappoint me. I liked it, as I find fascinating when an author manages to deal with certain themes, in this case socio-political, applying them to surreal contexts or in any case detached from common society. I can think of one of my favorite authors, George Orwell, who deals with topics of this kind, making them enjoyable to read, as he does, for example, in The Animal Farm. In fact, like Orwell's, Golding's writing in this novel is not at all heavy. On the contrary, it's fluent and conveys direct feelings. The feeling of anguish given by the narrative shines through in an excellent way, and in the same way the final scene is very touching.